Andrea?
Mr. President, this is your final news conference with us, we think. And at your first news conference, you said that the Soviets would commit any crime, would lie, would cheat, would steal to achieve their political goals. Now, tonight, we're celebrating your joint progress with President Gorbachev and celebrating a speech in which he renounced the use of force by the Soviet Union to achieve foreign policy goals. Do you think that he has really changed? And to the extent that he has changed, have you changed? What have you learned over these 8 years that may have changed your view of the Soviet system?
I know so many of you quoted this in that first press conference of mine, and Sam, I think it was your question. Yes, but none of you ever thought to give the complete answer. I said in their own words, this was their philosophy, and it was in writing, that there was no crime. All of these things were not a crime if they advanced the cause of socialism. Now, I didn't make that up. That's what they said. I think there's been a change. That was 4 leaders back before this one. And I think there have been some changes. One we just talked about earlier of his cutting arms.
What about the changes in your own thinking? Granted that they have changed and that Mr. Gorbachev is a very different kind of Soviet leader, but do you think in any way that your previous views might have been rigid or poorly formed?
Well, Andrea, there were differences in these leaders. And there is a situation now where many of the things that they preached have been proven unsound, and that's why their economy is in such great trouble. But I must say, I have never met with one of those leaders that was comparable to this man or had the approach that he has. But he knows that I feel that, well, we put it this way, as I've said, my philosophy is trust everybody, but cut the cards.
I was going to ask that, but let me just now ask you, what's the toughest thing that you've had in your job? What's been the toughest part of these 8 years? And I have a follow-up.
You realize how much time you're stealing with these follow-ups away from others that want to ask a question? Well, I think there have been many tough things. I don't think there's anything any tougher than to have to order these magnificent young men and women in our military today, and I think I'm prouder of them than of anything that has happened, to have to send them into danger, to order them to go someplace where their lives are threatened and their lives are taken. That's got to be something that any president would hesitate on, and I have to say was the greatest burden.
All right, let me ask the other side then. What have you enjoyed most? What is the thing you're going to miss the most?
Well, there are a number of things to miss, but I don't want to get into a lecture here. Let me just simply say enjoyed the most is the economic recovery. When I came here, for almost half a century, the debate on the Hill and the Congress had always been between more big spending programs, more power for the federal government, more intervention in private affairs by the federal government, as against those who were preaching less. Well, now today and for a long time, the very question that was asked here about the deficit. The argument on the Hill today is not more spending. The argument is how best can we reduce the deficit.
Personally, sir. I mean, personally as president.
Well, I appreciate very much the fact of being a party to this economic recovery. We were in a disaster situation when we came here. Judy?
Until recently, the United States has been reluctant for the Soviet Union to play a significant role in the Middle East. But now, with Mr. Gorbachev's new cooperation or openness, how do you suppose you could use him to expedite the peace process?
Well, I think that, once again, here we're going to have to see whether this is still acceptable to the parties that are to be involved in the direct negotiations. Actually, we talk an international gathering or something, but the Middle East, which is still technically in a state of war, that must be resolved between the nations of the Middle East in direct negotiations. And if we can help bring that about, then I would welcome anyone who wants to help.
In light of his speech yesterday at the UN, Are there any new steps that we can take to to continue the arms reduction process?
Oh, yes. We have long said that as soon as we once settle this issue of the START agreement, I have said that I think our next goal must be to now engage in negotiations on reducing conventional weapons.